We are continuing learning, Rabotai, the Chatzar Yosef. A lot of people just reached out to me actually recently trying to get a hold of this nice special edition blue version of this book. The Amazon version is less quality, not as good as this. So if you want it, just email me at my name. It's right there in the bottom, yosefzerab@gmail.com. Somebody got a hold of it, so Baruch Hashem, email me and we'll arrange it. It's not very expensive, shipping, etc. We'll talk about it. We are studying chapter 14, section 3, the last section of this chapter. It's all about a city called Sekhanya, the village of Sekhanya, which was in a Jewish settlement in Egypt that was destroyed shortly after the Second Temple era. And the Gemara speaks about over here where three Chachamim sat down to talk about the merits of the city, the status of the city. And they said, listen, if anybody knows anything about the city, please speak it. And the section 1, we went through the story over there about a young couple from the city that got taken captive and everything they went through. That was, we went through that already previously. Section 2 was last week where we talked about another story about how the economy, the rates were adjusted, were thrown off based on a very, very egregious sin that happened on Yom Kippur. Look over there. And now the section 3 is the third Chacham, opening up and talking about what he knows about this city, Kfar Sekhanya. We're on page 216 at the bottom. Says the Gemara the following thing. We're going to say it in English. Another sage opened up and said regarding Kfar Sekhanya the following thing. There was an incident, a story there, involving a man who set his eyes upon his wife to divorce her. It's another way of saying he was planning to divorce his wife. Okay, this is very scandalous, very dramatic stuff over here, like straight out of a soap opera. But we'll see there's something deep over here to learn. A guy wanted to divorce his wife, but her ketubah was large, it was too much money, and he wished to avoid having to pay it. Yes, there's always someone out there who's sneaky and trying to get around paying, right? So the ketubah, of course, is the marriage document, the contract that the husband writes with the wife, where if he was ever to divorce her or if he died and widowed her, he would have to his estate or his estate would have to pay her a large amount of money as a sort of protection policy for the women. So this ketubah was too much. He didn't want to pay. What did he do? There's ways to get out of paying the ketubah. One way, right? Let me just give you the introduction. One way to get out of paying it, or one way in which the husband will be exempt from paying ketubah, is if the wife was proven to be promiscuous or proven to be immodest in some way, he doesn't have to pay the ketubah. So what did he do? He went and he invited what the Gemara calls shushbinim. Shushbinim is an Aramaic term. It refers to the closest friends of the bride and groom at the wedding. That's called a shushbinin, right? Maybe we may call it a best man or the immediate, brothers and family of the bride and groom. Look at note number 2. These were the close friends or family of the bride and groom who were appointed to witness after the first night of the marriage that the sheets were blood-stained. This is one thing the Gemara talks about as well, proving that the bride was indeed a virgin, if that was the premise of the wedding, as the groom had expected, right? That's something somebody they would trust, and that was one of their roles. So he went and invited his shushbinin, his close family and friends, gave them food and drink, made them drunk, and then he lay his friends and his wife in one bed. He planted the scene. What do you want to say? He orchestrated the scene. He then brought egg whites. Right? We all know where this is going. I don't have to explain. He brought egg whites and he threw it between them on the bed. He then stood witness over them. He became the witness. And he came to Beit Din, the Jewish court of law, claiming that his wife had committed adultery, which would definitely get him out of the ketubah. A certain elder of the disciples of Shammai Hazaken, Shammai the elder, right? One of the Chachamim who came from the lineage or the yeshiva of Shammai Hazaken, one of the most major Tanaic sages in the times of the Gemara, the times of the Mishnah, really, before the Mishnah, way before the Mishnah. His name was, says the Gemara, Bava ben Bota. That was his name, Bava ben Bota. He said to them, this is the tradition that I received from Shammai Zaken. Meaning Shammai taught the following thing and I received this teaching from him, he says. What is it? Egg whites do something called solid. Samech vav lamed daled, which means it burns from fire. Whereas Shechvat Zera, manly fluids, is doche. Doche means to push away, or it's pushed. It's pushed from the fire. Meaning, these two similar white, clear liquids react differently to heat and fire. Which means he's saying that's how you want it, that's how you check. That's how you check the story. So they checked the matter, they put some fire there on those sheets, or next to the sheets, and they found it to be in accordance with his words. Which means they found it to be, it burned, it cooked. It was egg whites and not manly fluids. They then brought the husband to court and they administered lashes to him because they caught him lying, and they collected the price of her ketubah from him because he wanted to divorce her anyway. They made him go through the divorce and he paid the full ketubah. That's the story that this Chacham says about Kfar Sekhanya. These people were from the city of Kfar Sekhanya. Now Abaye says to Rav Yosef, says the Gemara now, right? This is sort of a post script to the three stories of Kfar Sekhanya. Therefore, it's very important that whoever's watching this video, B'ezrat Hashem, should go back and look at chapter 14, section 1, and chapter 14, section 2, to know the other two stories about Kfar Sekhanya, because we're going to be referencing them a lot in this video, because this section here sort of puts a bow on all three of the stories and connects them. This plus the two before us. So Abaye said to Rav Yosef, he said, but if the people of Kfar Sekhanya were so righteous, what is the reason that they were punished and destroyed? Right? Meaning, based on these three stories, if you look through these three stories, it kind of looks like it's painting the people of the city as in a very righteous way, that they're righteous people at that city. And so why did they get destroyed? Rabbi Yosef said to him, to Abaye, because they did not mourn for Yerushalayim. They did not join in to mourn when Yerushalayim was destroyed shortly before them. And terribly and utterly destroyed. Beit HaMikdash was burnt down. People were slaughtered in the streets completely. Jews were sent, became slaves and prisoners, and just complete utter destruction. Think of October 7th times 10,000. Right? But this Jewish place, Kfar Sekhanya, not too far away from them in Egypt, they did not mourn for them. Since it is written the following thing, it says in the prophet Isaiah 66:10, be happy with Yerushalayim and be glad with her. All its lovers rejoice with her, a joyful event. Who's going to be happy with Yerushalayim in the future when in the end of days? Kol ha-mit'abelim aleha, all those who mourn for her. That's what the prophet says, which means if you want to enjoy in the uttermost ecstasy in the times of the end of days, when Yerushalayim will be rebuilt, B'ezrat Hashem, speedily in our days, right now when it's not built, you have to mourn for it, as we do every year, in the 3 weeks, and especially the Tisha B'Av, which is in the summertime. That's why it's very important to join the community in that fast and everything else, best you can. All those who mourn for Yerushalayim will eventually see its happy days, right? That's what the prophet says here in Yeshaya, and these people did not do that in Kfar Sekhanya, and that was their downfall, says the Gemara. Look at Rashi, he explains a few points. Egg whites, what does he say about egg whites? Because it looks like manly fluids. He did so that a rumor should spread that they came upon his wife. Okay, we understood that. So egg whites burn, this means they get dry and crusted. And it cooks. You ever cook an egg white? It gets, sometimes it crusts. The next one is doche. Doche, that's what the semen does. This means that it enters and absorbs into the sheet and does not crust.
That's the question for me.
Yes.
Was it necessary for him to do the egg whites? Wouldn't he have won the case without the egg whites?
He's only one witness. He's only one witness. You need two witnesses.
And he stood witnesses over them.
Ah, you're right. He brought witnesses. He brought witnesses to see the egg whites.
But the egg whites were not necessary. The fact that she was in a bed with his friends, isn't that more than enough?
But they didn't see any act happening, so they needed some more evidence. It helps the case. If it's really semen, it helps the case. Did you follow along the story so far? It helps the case.
Isn't being in the bed an issue?
Yes, but it's not enough to... Are you saying, isn't that enough to say that she is being immodest?
Immodest, all that.
If that she's in the same bed with the other people?
They fell asleep. Even though it was orchestrated, but just to the naked eye, they fell asleep.
Would that be enough? It might have been enough. It might have been enough. But this guy doesn't necessarily know that.
Okay.
He doesn't know that. He was trying to make the case stronger, and that was actually his downfall. Because they used that to prove that it was a sham.
And the other question?
Long story short, a guy doesn't want to pay his ketubah. He calls his friends over, the people from the wedding. He gets drunk. He gets them all drunk. He puts his wife in the bed, puts them in the same bed next to her, throws egg whites in between them. Says,
very professional.
Right? They brought it to the Chacham, Baba Ben Bota. He says, I have a teaching from Shammai that egg whites crust when you put fire on it, and ejaculation gets absorbed into the sheets. So they did this experiment. It crusted. They lashed the guy, and they made him pay the ketubah.
Beautiful.
You like it?
Very
Justice is served.
Absolutely.
Had these people mourned for Jerusalem, we're saying the city would not have been destroyed?
That's what the Gemara is implying. Yes.
Even though the Romans and everyone that just came and destroyed everything in their path?
They would. This is further away. This is in Egypt. This is further away.
Egypt, so we're saying they would
It wasn't necessarily in their way.
It wasn't like just part of this annihilate all the Jews. It wasn't like
They really only annihilated the cities where the Jews sort of made militias and would ambush the Roman soldiers. That's where they really crushed them eventually. The Jews are actually having success for a short time with the guerrilla warfare. They were having a short-term success, but then the Romans just crushed. They just threw everything they had at them and crushed them.
so we're saying they would not have went to this town in Egypt.
Perhaps not. That's what the Gemara is saying. Okay, so now let's go into our questions section. All right. Question number 1. When considering the major plot points of the last two incidents. Okay, so I think it's important that we just quickly talk about all three stories, just quickly, because this chapter ties all three stories together and about Sekhanya, to figure out really the depth of what they were all about. So, story number 1 was captives, young boy and girl who were going to get married, who were already almost married. They got taken captive. The captor said to them, go into a private room and be together to have more children. When they went in the room, the girl said, don't touch me because you didn't give me ketubah, and therefore you're not allowed to be with me. Right. And he didn't touch her, and he ended up dying, and then so he held himself. And she said so his test was greater than Yosef Tzaddik. Right. So that's a big righteous story about them, about the people from that city. Second story was last week where the rate for wheat went down by 1 unit, meaning it became 1 unit more expensive. And everyone looked around and said, what did we do? What sin did we do that caused that? And they investigated and they found out that a father and a son had a relationship with an engaged girl on Yom Kippur. Okay? So they found them, they stoned them, and then the economy went back to normal.
How did they find them?
I don't know how, but it doesn't say how. But they did an investigation. Okay? So that's story number 2. Story number 3 is what we just talked about now about this whole egg white situation. Okay? So those 3 stories are the 3 stories that the Chachamim knew about this city, and Abaye and the Gemara seems to imply by these 3 stories that the stories are saying that they were righteous people If that's the case, why were they destroyed? So Rabbi Yosef answered to him, because they didn't mourn Yerushalayim properly when Yerushalayim was destroyed shortly before them. That is the whole Gemara, basically. Okay. Now we go into our questions. When considering the major plot points of the last two incidents, the how do I pronounce this properly? Licentiousness.
It's correct.
Can you give us a definition of what licentiousness is, please?
Promiscuity.
Promiscuity. That's right. Immodest behavior. Okay. On Yom Kippur, that was discussed in the previous section of this chapter, and the attempted framed adultery in our Gemara here. When you talk about those two stories, it seems difficult to call these people righteous. Why does Abaye assume, they were so righteous based on these stories? It's talking about really disgusting things that happened. Plus, getting drunk to the point of complete loss of awareness, as happened to the Shushbinim in our Gemara, is surely not viewed as righteous. Nevertheless, Abaye seems to take it for granted that the people of this place were righteous, as his statement is, since the people of Sekhanya were so righteous, etc., etc. That's what it seems to indicate. How could this be? Where exactly is the righteousness? That's question number one. Question number two. What is the punishment for not mourning? Why? Why is the punishment for not mourning properly for Yerushalayim so severe that it caused the entire city of Sekhanya to be destroyed? How does the verse Yeshaya 66:11, which we just mentioned at the end of the Gemara here, how does it show this exactly? Lastly, last question. Why is it that all three incidents, all three stories told by the Chachamim about this city of Sekhanya that we just went through, are dealing with the subject of intimacy between men and women? Did you notice that? Every single topic is talking about some sort of intimacy between a man and a woman. More specifically, they are centered around the issue of the male-female relationship. In the first incident, in the section 1, the captive man held himself back nobly from giving into his desires. In the second incident, in section 2 of this chapter, the father and the son committed adultery with an engaged girl on Yom Kippur. In the third incident in our Gemara, the cheapskate husband attempts to frame his wife for adultery to avoid paying her ketubah. Why is this theme pulsating through everything that is recorded in the Gemara about this place? That is what we have to investigate, my friends. Keep that in mind. Now, let's do B'ezrat Hashem a few commentaries. We're already approaching our time. A few commentaries, and this section is pretty nice and bulky. It might take about 2 or maybe 3 sessions. Maybe, hopefully 2. Let's go first to the Ya'avet, Rabbi Yaakov Emden. He says the following. It seems, we're on page 218, it seems that the placing of the egg whites was an extra piece of evidence that he placed there simply to strengthen his claim. This is your question. Your question is, hold on, he could have already proved that they were immodest by bringing the witnesses and seeing that they're in the same bed, which is already a problem. On a technical level, there you go. The egg whites were not necessary for what he tried to achieve. The testimony of the witnesses he planted to see the Shushbanim sleeping in the same bed as the wife would have been enough evidence alone to legally prove that she was transgressing the proper conduct of a Jewish woman. That's what the Gemara Masech Ketubot says. That is the criteria to make her forfeit her ketubah. She has to just be immodest. That's it.
But she could be anusah, and if there was...
What do you mean? She's sleeping, snoring in the bed, comfortably next to another man. Excuse me. Asur.
Okay, so as it happened in this case, it was a setup. Right?
Yes.
So if the case went to Beddin, for example,
it did.
Would say, was there an act committed? And say no.
It's not enough. You don't need the act.
Yeah,
he's not trying to execute her. Yeah. He's not trying to execute to say that she committed adultery. Exactly. She was immodest. That's enough just so that he doesn't have to pay ketubah. Didn't want to kill the girl. She wanted to not pay ketubah as a cheapskate. Or maybe,
he figured nobody's going to burn the egg whites. It was
yes.
just a nice touch.
You see, that's the point. Sometimes sometimes the cherry on top is what destroys you.
Correct. Because by
that's called greed, by the way.
Yes.
You already have what you need. You just want that extra drop, and that destroys everything.
But in reality, if they would say, look, you plant the idea in the witness's mind that they saw things when they didn't. They saw the egg whites.
Yeah, but they don't know what it was. It was a white liquid.
Yes. What else is there? And that's it. And
You're saying they had dirty minds.
No, the case is sealed. No questions anymore.
Yes.
You understand?
Quicker,
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes.
it. But it was the case that it got destroyed because of it.
Right? So transgressing the proper conduct of a Jewish, this Masechet Ketubot says that. It's called Dat Yehudit. Transgressing Dat Yehudit. That's enough. Which means if she goes outside in a short skirt, that's it, done, no ketubah.
Even if you married
No
her,
ketubah.
if the
Crazy,
guy
huh?
married her,
The guy married her knowing she's not. No, I don't think so. You can't. You can't marry her on the condition that she's not going to keep the proper laws of a Jewish woman. You're getting married through religious means, with under the chuppah, with two witnesses and a kosher, and you paid for the rabbi, and etc. etc. I'm sorry, no rabbi. Okay, we're going to marry on the condition that you could be immodest. No such thing. Never. You can't make a condition against the basis of everything.
well, the case is they dress immodestly, the husband and the wife.
Okay, fine.
While they were dating, they were immodest.
Sure.
Now they're married, they're immodest.
Yeah.
Can you divorce her for being immodest?
I don't work in a Beit Din, but as far as I understand, if he ever wants to divorce her, pretty much, he doesn't have to pay ketubah. It's kind of crazy.
I doubt it very much.
How? This is with you going in.
Yes. And then it was not on the marriage on the full.
It's the default ketubah. It's default. That's the default minimum rules. You understand?
I doubt it.
I understand, but I think there's more to it.
There's always more to it. Okay, let's go further. Thus, the egg whites were not at all necessary, and ironically, they were what led to the revelation of his deceit. Okay, that's the Yavitz. Says the Maharsha now, regarding the case of the immoral act committed on Yom Kippur, right? So you have to keep these three stories in mind. The Yom Kippur story was the second story, which we did last week. Our Gemara indicates that the people of the city were righteous in the sense that this incident was the only major sin that took place in the whole city. So that's what the Maharsha explains Abaye. He says, Abaye said, oh, they're so righteous. Why? Because that was the only sin that they found that took place that caused the rate of grain to go up, which means every other situation was a righteous situation. It was that one odd thing, meaning by highlighting the one bad thing, it's also highlighting indirectly that everything else was good, right? This is supported by the fact that as soon as the people of the city brought the sinners to justice, the rate of the currency and the economy was automatically readjusted back to normal. The point is that the rest of the city was full of righteous people. So that's how Maharsha explains Abaye. Regarding the case of the attempted framing for adultery in our Gemara with the egg whites, the reason the people of the city are considered righteous is because the judges who listened to the testimony of the witnesses were willing to be stringent to make her forbidden to her husband, even though there was a chance that the white material found on the bed could have been an involuntary nocturnal seminal emission, aka what some call a wet dream, by one of the shushbinim, one of the guys laying there, meaning it was possible that no act of adultery actually took place.
Was he naked at the time?
We don't have that information.
Why does that matter?
Look at note number 5. Normally for a case like this, listen.
Like I said, if she's a Nusah and she got there somehow mistake, like somebody got her drunk on purpose and all
Yeah,
that
he did.
stuff. So if she got there, any Beddin is going to ask a lot of leading questions to try to ascertain what happened.
Yeah.
Okay?
Let's see. Note number 5. Normally, for a case like this to be upheld in Beit Din, the witnesses must have witnessed the actual act of adultery to occur,
That's what I said.
or at least visual evidence that the couple was engaged in intercourse. This would be conclusive evidence that adultery actually was committed. That's what his point was. He was trying to prove. But it becomes forbidden for the husband and wife to have relations
After
from that point forward, if indeed there's proof that she
did with somebody else.
committed adultery. Rather, they must be divorced. And, in those times they would execute her in the times of Beit Din. Now we don't have that, right? After the Beit Mikdash was destroyed and all that. Nowadays, if that's proven, we just divorce the girl without a ketubah, and she forfeits a ketubah, she gets no payment. And this happened after the execution time. There was no execution, right? This story happened way after executions ended already. So the main point is that he would get out of the marriage without having to pay the ketubah. In this case, however, these requirements were not met since the witnesses he planted did not see any active intercourse happening. Despite that, the judges still were willing to rule her forbidden to her husband as a stringency for the reason that Maharsha goes on to explain. That, for what they reasoned. Look what he says. Go forward. I'll explain it afterwards. The judges reasoned, Maharsha says, that the Shushbinim, the other guys who were laying there in the bed with her, that them having an involuntary nocturnal seminal emission was impossible. Improbable, maybe I should say better. Because it was so rare for the men of their city to experience such emissions due to their great righteousness.
Ouch.
That's what he says. Accordingly, the judges reasoned that the only other possible explanation for this white liquid in the bed, for the circumstances the witnesses testified to, in other words, the white substance on the sheets, must be that an act of adultery actually occurred. So he's saying that they're righteous enough not to have a wet dream, but they're not righteous enough not to sleep with the married woman. That's what the Maharsha says. Listen, that's his opinion. I think we mentioned this glaring issue in the Chatzar Yosef. Yeah. We'll get there, B'ezrat Hashem. That's what, right now we have to just read what the Chachamim say and try to understand it, try to maybe defend it. Next thing he says, regarding the fact that Kfar Sekhanya was destroyed because they did not mourn Yerushalayim, we must beg the question, says the Maharsha. Why would any Jewish settlement not mourn Yerushalayim? Yerushalayim is the motherland, right? As we might say. Why would you? It doesn't make sense. The reason is because the people of Yerushalayim had certain advantages over other cities at the time, namely that they had better access to wisdom, and that they did not have to face the burden of leaving their hometown and traveling to Yerushalayim for the 3 pilgrimage festivals throughout the Jewish year, as the rest of the cities had to do. So if you lived in Yerushalayim, you didn't have to travel far away 3 times a year. You were right there. Whereas everywhere else, right, we have the mitzvah of showing up to Yerushalayim at the time the Beit HaMikdash stood. Every male had to show up to Yerushalayim 3 times a year, and Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, and bring sacrifices, right, and party over there and celebrate. So it was harder for everybody else. So because of this, the other cities, they harbored a certain hatred towards the people of Yerushalayim, certain jealousy, I guess, and they did not mourn the city after it was run down. That is why the verse quoted by Gemara, Yeshaya 66:10, says, well, it should be 11 actually, yeah? 11, no 10. So what did so I have a typo in the questions. It's 66:10, not 11. Okay, that's what the prophet says in Yeshaya 66:10, the following: be glad with her, meaning her is Yerushalayim, all its lovers, all those who love Yerushalayim, be glad with her. Those words seem to suggest an exclusion of the city's haters, that there existed such a people who are not the city's lovers, but actually her haters, which means there was this animosity, if you would say so, towards Yerushalayim. Let's go through all the commentaries today, B'ezrat Hashem, and then we'll do Chatzar Yosef next week, yeah?
Is that fair to say?
He had to figure out why. He had to figure out how could it be that the other cities, such as Sekhanya, wouldn't mourn Yerushalayim. Like, we have something, God forbid, happened today in Israel, we mourn. You know, and not even Yerushalayim. It happened next to Gaza, we mourn. You know, it's very interesting. That's how he tries to explain it. Let's see further. Me'orenaim, he writes the following regarding the verse Yeshaya 66:11. It does again. Is it 11 or 10? I'm going back and forth over here. I have to fix this. I think it's 10. Okay, we're talking about the same verse. It does not say rejoice in a joyful event. Rather, it says rejoice with her, a joyful event. Talking about Yerushalayim, be happy with Yerushalayim. All those who mourn for her, rejoice with her. Meaning that Hashem wants for the rest of Israel to be like Yerushalayim, being with her in that sense. And those who do not mourn it, while it is desolate, will mourn the destruction of their own cities. That's how he explains the verse in Yeshaya. Rejoice with her, a joyful lament. We said there. Eyun Yaakov, he says the reason the people of Kfar Sekhanya were considered righteous is based on the fact that the fact that in the incident of our Gemara, the Shushbinim were drunk and laying next to their friend's wife and still had no sinful thoughts in their minds. Because they didn't actually do it. They didn't actually do anything. They were drunk, laying down next to their friend's wife, and they were able to control themselves, so to speak. Kind of like story number 1, where the guy controlled himself. That's how he defends their righteousness. All the Chachamim are trying to figure out where's the righteousness here, and they're all giving their own answer. Now, the last thing is the Ben Yehoyada. He says the following, Ben Ish Chai, Allah Shalom, he says the following. The explanation of the details in the incident of our Gemara are as follows. The bed that the wife slept on was a rather large bed and could accommodate several people. He waited until the Shushbinim got drunk, because if they were not drunk, even though the husband would have given them permission to sleep on the same bed as his wife, they would never have done so, because they would have been concerned about improper thoughts entering their minds. How could you be in the same bed as another man's wife? It was only after they got drunk that the husband himself carried them over to her bed, even without them being aware. Without them being aware of what was happening. Look at note number 6. This is quite different than the commentary that we just read, the Yun Yaakov, who implies that the Shushbinim were very conscious in their lying down, and they knew where they were lying down in the same bed as the wife, and still they didn't do anything. They controlled themselves. That's how so it's a different explanation here, right? Since how could the Yun Yaakov call them righteous for controlling their thoughts if they were not aware of their surroundings, right? Okay, back to the Ben Yehuda. He says she too was in a deep slumber, and did not feel them being put on her bed. Then the husband framed them with the egg whites. He specifically set up the Shushbinim as opposed to any other men, so that other people would believe his story, his plot, since they would consider that it is more likely that for an act of adultery to occur with someone who is more familiar and friendly with the wife, such as the Shushbinim, which are family and friends, versus other strange men. Still, we may ask, why did he set it up with 2 men rather than 1? Shushbinim is a plural word, so we have at least 2 men here. Wouldn't 1 man be enough? Why 2 men? Right. Would 1 man not have been sufficient for his plot? The answer is that the husband set up 2 men on purpose so that people would not think that the whole thing was a deception by the husband, since they would consider that if he wanted to frame them, then all he would have done is just set up 1 guy instead of 2. Surely framing 2 men is much too difficult as opposed to just 1. So it's reverse psychology. So he anticipated the deflection, and he said, okay, I'll do 2 guys. For sure people will believe it. Okay. Regarding the case...
He lists his own friend.
I know, it's crazy. Regarding the case of the immoral act of Yom Kippur that was in the previous section of the chat, the story number 2, the righteousness of the people of the city can be found by the fact that the rate of the currency decreased by 1 from the number 40. If you remember, it was 40 modiyot of grain. There's a certain weight of grain you could buy for 1 dinar, and then the next day it went up. The price went up that only 39 modiyot, which means you could buy less, but the same amount of money, less. So basically, the difference was 1 from 40. This shows that their sustenance was totally due to the merit of the Torah learning, which we said before, which was given on Mount Sinai, of course, through Moshe Rabbeinu, over a 40-day period. So 40 represents Torah. So that's a hint, sort of, that they had great Torah learning, and that was their righteousness in that regard. That which the Maharsha wrote now. So the Ben Yehuda sees what the Maharsha wrote, because Ben Yehuda is writing later, and he's sort of commenting and disagreeing. What did the Maharsha write? We just mentioned a few minutes ago. Regarding the case of the attempted framing of the wife in our Gemara, it does not seem correct, right? The Maharsha said that, the judges assumed that they would sure not have a wet dream, but still they might have slept with another man's wife. So, Ben Yehuda says it doesn't seem correct, since the judges of every city, in general, were righteous. That was hard for me myself to understand, so I tried to make sense of it in note number 9. Perhaps the Ben Yehuda means that the judges judged the Shushbinim favorably when they did not entertain the possibility that they had an involuntary nocturnal seminal emission, which usually only frequents those of weak spiritual prowess, right? So usually. The fact that the judges made such a calculation shows the righteousness of the judges themselves for putting them in a good light, and thus fulfilling the commandment in the Torah that says, "B'tzedek tishpot amitecha," which means with righteousness you shall judge your fellow, judging your friend favorably, right? So they've judged them favorably, saying they for sure wouldn't have a wet dream, which Rashi interprets over there in the Torah as meaning that a judge should try to attribute righteousness to whom he is judging. Judges were expected to do this in general, whether in this city or any other place. It does not necessarily mean that the people were in fact righteous too, however. See others, okay. So that's how we try to make sense of the Ben Yehuda, who says that, you can't say the judges were judges. You can't say the judges being righteous is a sign that the rest of the people were righteous, right? Because the question was, how do we know the people were righteous? And the Maharsha explained, oh, we know because the judges were righteous because they judged them favorably. But the Rabbi Yehuda is saying, hold on, that's every judge is supposed to do that. That's a requirement for a judge in every city. It's not anything special about the city. How do we know the people were righteous, right? So that's his point in the Maharsha. And just because the judges of the city of the Kfar Sekhanya were righteous, it does not follow the people of the city must have also been. Okay. Rather, the reason this story proves that they were righteous is because the husband had to make the Shushpanim intoxicated, drunk, in order for them to lie in the same bed as his wife, as explained below. If they were not righteous, they would have agreed, even while sober, to lay down in the same bed as his wife, despite the likely chance of graphic images about his wife entering their minds. The fact that he had to get them drunk shows that in their sober state, they would never have considered doing so, and that was a certain righteousness. Okay, that is all the commentary on our Gemara. We went through a lot of points. B'ezrat Hashem, next week, we're going to go into the Chatzar Yosef and unravel some of these depths. B'ezrat Hashem. Yes? Question.
At this time, there was no execution.
Yeah, this is after the Sanhedrin was destroyed. This is after Beit Mikdash was destroyed. No.
So if the Mikdash was still there, and they found this egg whites, but let's say it was actually semen.
Yeah.
They didn't see the act, but they found semen on the bed. The guys were drunk, the women were drunk. What happens to that in that case? Two witnesses came and saw just the semen on the bed.
I don't think that's good enough. I mean, this is really a Masechet Sanhedrin question that we have to go into to really know. But I don't think that is good enough. You have to see either the act, or you have to see them, hugging each other, so to speak, holding each other in such a way where they would actively be doing it. Now, I mean, you don't have to see the actual organs, going in, but from afar you see them, wrapped around each other. That's already.
That's already executed.
No. Wrapped around each other in such a way where they would be committing adultery, actually.
Because then, this guy's putting the wife to death, and his friends or her friends, whoever, should put him to death. If this happened in that.
No, they wouldn't. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. Because I'm assuming there was. Okay, it depends. They're sleeping. It's not good enough. They're sleeping. Okay. They were sleeping. If they were wrapped around each other, awake, then would be a problem. Good. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.